off air. All right, there it goes. I think.
Says live now. Says
All
live
right,
in
so
my
we're
corner.
live. So welcome everyone. I am Yazuki Wolf here with my guest today, Nihongo Gamer. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello.
I think
Hello, I'm
a number of
Nihongo
you already met him before, but let's just get a quick gist of what you're about.
Is this the first time I've appeared? Oh wait, that's right. We did the Steam thing before.
Yep.
I'm Nihongo Gamer. I have a channel that's basically about video games and Japanese stuff in general, and I like to draw, which is how I know Yazuki Wolf, who does you do all your drawing tutorials and all that.
Yep, and we also.
Oh, your screen is flashing, by the way. Okay, sorry, it stopped.
And we also do some gaming stuff as we went to gaming conventions in Japan and whatnot. So, very cool country, Japan. You can meet lots of very interesting people. But anyways, the topic for the day is VR, virtual reality, what it needs to survive. I wanted to get Nihongo Gamer in on this because we've talked about this a couple times, like privately, and I think we kind of have different angles of how we think about it. So I thought it could be an interesting discussion for the two of us to kind of tackle this question together. So first off, let me say, so you Nihongo Gamer, what is your general idea of like what the problems are that VR is facing right now?
Yeah, personally, yeah, I think because we have very different views on this. The way I see it is that VR launched, like when Oculus came up with their VR headset. Well, sorry, the Oculus Rift. When they came up with the Rift, they're like, yeah, VR is going to happen next year. And then they did the Kickstarter, and then there was a delay, and then they got bought out by Facebook, and then they finally released a headset. And I think it was it last year, I think. And then Vive actually beat them to it. Vive they just came out of nowhere with their headset.
Right. It's
and
crazy.
What's happened? Yeah, it's crazy. What?
Oh, it's just crazy because we were hearing about Oculus for so long, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, now there's Vive, and then Vive just comes out right before them.
I feel like there was a good 3 years of Oculus, and then the Vive just came out absolutely nowhere.
Possibly even more than 3. I don't know.
Maybe
especially in
more,
Japan. Yeah. In Japan, we only heard about Oculus. Like Vive, like no one was talking about Vive, and then right when Vive came out, then all of a sudden that became the main thing.
Yeah, you were talking about Vive, and I remember I told you we were having lunch one day, and I told Wolf, I said, Vive is going to not survive in Japan. I said, it's all Oculus. Vive is just this random thing that's just appeared, and now look, look at it.
And I think I agreed with you that time too. I was like, yeah, I really love Vive, but no one cares about Vive here. It's all Oculus. But then once Vive came out, then everyone forgot about Oculus.
Everyone forgot about Oculus. But in a way, I feel like I think they kind of forgot about both because we had like 3 or 4 years of Oculus. Yep. Then Vive came out, and then a bunch of people did buy Vive. And the Vive came down in price, or maybe we had Vive for a good year before the price came down. And I still think it hasn't made tracks. It still hasn't gripped onto the industry. Hasn't really gripped onto it yet.
Right. It was.
I feel like I don't know anyone apart from you who has one. So it's like there's the two of us. We have them, and no one else. And there's a few arcades where they spend a lot of money on having people stand next to a machine. I'm sure they're not profitable yet. It's just, and I still don't know anyone who has a GTX 1060 other than you and I. And I certainly don't know anyone who owns a 1080. Right. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that with cryptocurrency and all that as well. So there's sales reasons as well. But I don't think it's really gained the traction that it needs yet. And what's your general stance?
First, I just wanted to break down a little bit. I'm going the switching screens back and forth is annoying me. I'm going to actually put it on me for now. Okay, so I wanted to break down real quick the history of how I see it, of how it kind of VR happened in Japan. And we talked about a little bit earlier where how it was originally everyone was talking about Oculus, and then Vive was coming out, so then everyone started talking about Vive. But it seems like the virtual reality system that's kind of taken over here is PlayStation VR. Even there, it's not like it's a huge thing, like everyone has it. But I think in the VR space, most people are in Japan that I know, Japanese people who have VR, they have PlayStation VR because it was cheaper and it was already accessible to people because they had PlayStations. And also Japanese in general don't have very like PC engine machines that can handle VR usually, but they did have PlayStations, right?
Yeah, they've got those little they've got those PCs where the monitor still sits on top of the PC.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, you're right.
I've seen a lot of those.
Sometimes I'll go to my friend's house and you look at their house and they have like it's like really nice, neat and tidy and everything, and there's like no dirt or anything. But then you look over at the computer and there's the whole like keyboard is just like covered in like a film of dust. You're like, oh, I can see where your priorities are.
Yeah, but though there is one cool thing about that, and it's because the computers are so old, a lot of them still have mechanical keyboards, which is quite cool.
Right.
Because that's coming back into fashion, right?
Yeah. So then the other thing I wanted to mention was that that was kind of where the VR personal devices went. But then I think now most developers in Japan are more focused on how would you describe it? Amusement park VR, I guess.
Mm.
I think it's kind of a Japanese thing. I don't know if they have it outside of Japan, but in Japan, it seems like every other week or month or so, there's another virtual reality amusement park that opens up. And I should classify when I say amusement park, I don't mean like an actual big like amusement park style thing. I just mean like a building where you go in and they'll have a whole like I don't know 10 or 5 or so VR kind of what do you call it experiences that you can go to. And usually it costs like
I mean it's like an amusement park when you're in VR though. Like when you've put the headset on, you know, it looks big. Like you could be an amusement park, I suppose. But when you take it off, yeah, you're in a room with 10 machines.
Right, exactly. And I'm going to see if I could get like some pictures of that to kind of clarify to people that don't know what I'm talking about. So while
do you remember the names of any of those? There's one in Sunshine City, I know for sure, which is in Ikebukuro, which is where Evo Japan just happened. Oh yeah,
did you hear anything about that?
I don't know if anyone actually went and played any of the VR stuff, but apparently it went down well. Evo in Japan. I think a lot of people did go over there. I was surprised that so many people entered. Like I thought, okay, it's the first Evo in Japan. Maybe it'll have like I don't know, a quarter of the number of people who show up to Evo. But I think Street Fighter had over 2,000, 2,500, maybe almost 2,500 entries, which is pretty much the same number of people that enter in Evo America. I think so. It's quite a lot of people.
Okay, so it is getting catching on here. Cool. But, all right, so I'm gonna look at Fort Gamer. Because they usually have that.
I can't remember the names of any of them, but they always show pictures of people looking like they're in some sort of ride, like they're wearing a harness and they're flying through the sky. And it's like, if you do VR, you could do this too. And all of us who play with Vive, we're like, that's the last thing I want to do in VR. I do not want to zoom around on a roller coaster.
There are a few cool things though, like so. The vast majority of them, I look at, I'm like, well, I could just do that at home by myself, with my Vive. So why would I pay $30 to do that for just 2 hours? That's usually what it is. It's like $30, and then you just have like 2 hours of time to play. I was like, I can play forever at home without paying that. But there's
exactly. And if you feel sick at home, you can stop. If you do it, if you're in the VR center, if you feel sick after 15 minutes, then you've wasted an hour and 45 minutes.
Right. It's like an hour and 45 minutes left. I'm already sick. Although, most of them don't really make me sick though, especially the ones in those types of I don't know what you call it places, because they're more it's not just like a Vive. They usually have like a harness or something that you wear or some type of like.
Yeah, I think that's where it could really flourish, especially in if it is not gaining the traction as quickly as possible as we need it to in the console and PC space, then if arcades is the place for VR in Japan, which could be a very good thing for the industry in general.
Right.
If that is true, then yeah, going all the way, having harnesses and really providing experiences that people are unlikely to purchase at home, then I think that could be a really good way, a really good way for them to get people on the boat, on the VR boat.
I agree, and I think I found an article here. So 1 second, let me switch to my desktop view. Where do I go to get that? But so that's really cool. The other thing that they have that I think could be an advantage is that you could have multiplayer games, which is a little. I mean, of course, you can do multiplayer games in VR, just the Vive at home. But you're not in the same actual physical place, and that's where I think it looks really cool. Like there's one in Odaiba that I saw where it's like a zombie. It's like there's kind of like a basketball arena type of area space. It's kind of like laser tag, but instead of using laser tag, you have like I don't know if it was an Oculus or a Vive, but you have your VR headset on, and you're all in the same actual like warehouse area with actual like foam foam like things that you run around and stuff, and then you in the VR space you see zombies and you're all fighting together.
That's amazing!
To take out the zombies. Yeah.
Wait, and you've tried that already?
No, I haven't. I saw it that they had it in Odaiba, but you have to get a reservation to do it, and it once again it's like $30-40. So I haven't got around to doing it.
And this is something that I don't know.
Good.
Is there a live chat happening at the same time as this on air hangout? Is there something that commenters could if people were interested in suggesting something? I think that might be difficult for the two of us is that because we aren't familiar with what's happening out in the West in terms of VR.
Right.
Like, do they have anything nearly as interesting in terms of,
yeah, I would like to hear that, definitely.
Arcade centers like in the West? Because if this is what VR is in Japan, then what's happening out West is I'm really curious to know.
Yeah, especially I'd like to know if they actually have these types of like we call it VR amusement park type of places or not.
Yeah. We've got to come up with a name for it.
So I think, but in Japan they call it amusement. They call it like VR amusement park or something. Like, so here, this is a. Can you see my screen? I'm not sure if it's showing up or not.
Yeah, I can see your screen. Yeah, I can see it. It's full screen. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the let's see here, Sega VR area Shinjuku. So apparently you go here in Shinjuku.
Oh, that's catchy.
Yeah, Sega
so
VR
catchy.
area Shinjuku.
Sega VR area. First of all, a company that you haven't heard of for a very long time because they don't make consoles anymore. They still make Sonic, but let's face it. Anyway, VR, which is a buzzword, but then what? Shinjuku, that's just a place, and then what was the other word? Area.
Sega area.
Area.
It's hard to say. VR area by itself is hard to say. It's kind of a tongue twister. VR area. I don't know.
All right. But, so this is my general argument, though. My general argument is that I don't think they've got a good cohesive strategy for VR. It's all just kind of happening, and what's good about it is that it's organic. But because it's all just happening in a sort of disorganized way, Sega Shinjuku area VR is kind of like. Well, if people aren't catching on to it, then we know why already.
Right.
Anyway.
It's like, well, we got the buzzword VR. But I mean, that's also sort of just the thing about Japan, too, though. I mean, you look at your like general Japanese movies when they translate it into, or like, I don't know, I can't think of a good example. Like, what was, I think there was that movie Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah.
I think in Japan, they renamed it like Busman or something like that, or like Bus or something like that. Like they aren't really good at like making catchy sounding names in English. I don't think.
It's true. They changed the titles of Disney movies as well, don't they? Like Frozen was turned into like Anna and the Snow Queen. It's like who's Anna? We don't care who Anna. Who's Anna?
Right.
They would have just called it Snow Queen. That would have been quite cool. Anyway.
Yeah. So they're not, and even just look at the most popular like mobile games. You have like Puzzle and the Dragon. That's such a catchy name, isn't it? There's puzzles and this dragon, so Puzzle and a Dragon.
And it's like it sounds amazing in Japanese, right? Because in Japan they're like, oh, 3 words that are clearly English, but we don't really understand them, but we kind of understand them, and then it gets exported wholesale to the West, and it's just Puzzle and Dragons. Well, that's a game I'm not going to play.
Right. Yeah, it's
if they called it like Puzzle Crush or Dragon's Den or anything.
Yep. But they're not good at the kind of like linking words together. It's just like pick one word and then pick another word and then just there you go.
Some sort of conjunction in the middle. Ando.
Yeah.
Just put it in the middle.
But so it looks here like they have John Wick here, some type of like tie-in with the John Wick movie, and The Mummy. It looks like that's a really good movie there, The Mummy, right?
Well, I didn't see the new one. I saw the original.
Yeah.
The new one
was pretty good. Well, which original do you mean, though? Do you mean
I'm talking about the very first movie called The Mummy, and it was like 20 years ago, and I went to see it. And I was like, "What is Because I thought it was meant to be a serious movie. I thought it was going to be scary, and then it just goes completely bonkers halfway through. It turns into this giant comedy.
Oh, so that's not the original. That's the remake. Right. The original's in black and white.
No, I didn't see that one.
Yep. So
I saw the one that when we were in high school.
Yeah, who is that? Who's the guy in that? But I don't
remember his name.
But those ones. So the original was kind of like a classic. The remake, the one when we saw it when we were younger. Those ones they weren't great, but they were good in a campy type of way, I think.
Yeah.
So. But anyways, back to the VR thing.
Yes.
you can see in this picture generally what these like VR spaces kind of look like, where they have like this kind of barriered off area where you can test the VR at, and it has like the cables that are hooked up from the top, so that you don't have to worry about like getting snagged on cables and everything. So it's a very streamlined type of VR experience, which is good for Japan, I think, because in Japan we have such small apartments most of the time that you can't really have a setup like this in your house.
Whereas it's true, I remember something like this when I was living in the States for a while. I remember doing a paragliding. Is it paragliding when you're hang glider? I remember doing a hang glider VR experience, and I remembered that for the rest of my life. I was like, oh, that was really cool, and that happened in like 1995. And then it never came back until like 2016. It's like no more VR for another, how many years is that? Is that 20 years? It's like 20 years. You won't have VR again.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because I think I tried VR too when I was like, I don't know, like 13 or something, and it was like
ages ago. I
remember it was like in an arcade, and they had like steps or something that you were walking on, but you were seeing a VR area, and you like shot a gun at people or something.
Terrifying.
Yeah,
yeah. I remember you were able to hold the gun in front of you, and you would see it appear in front of you in VR. I was like, this is the future.
Yep.
It was 20 years in the future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is that a lot of the technology was around even like way back in the day, because like the Power Glove from Nintendo.
Oh yeah.
Apparently, that was based off of some like really like high tech what do you call it, technology, I guess, where that was on the cutting edge like VR technology.
Right.
But in order to sell it, they had to bring the price down. So it just
became this pointless thing.
Yeah, because so, like for example, the original prototype, it used like this like really powerful like I forgot what's called like glass fibers or something to like detect your hand movement and everything, and it could project in a VR space.
Oh.
But then
we want that for Vive now, don't we?
Yeah,
that would be amazing.
Yeah, but then they had to make it simpler, so they put cheaper like materials, and it became the Power Glove, which didn't work the way it was supposed to. But the prototype was already okayed, and they had to get it on the market by such and such a date. So it's like, okay, just pull it together, throw it out there, and
Yeah. Wait, was Power Glove, was that a Nintendo product in the end?
Yeah, but the original prototype wasn't Nintendo. It was a different.
Right.
It was some guy doing, and it wasn't actually for gaming originally. It was just like kind of a computer technology thing. But
yeah.
But anyways,
so VR, the story of VR is funny, isn't it? Because we had it, and then it sort of stumbled, and then it came back with like Power Glove, but that was like a joke. And then Virtual Boy came out, and I thought, okay, hey, maybe this is a bit closer to getting VR to come back. And I bought one, and it was a joke. It was a joke. Whose idea was it to have the whole thing in red? Whose idea was that? I really want to know, because I couldn't play it for more than 5 minutes at a time. Like, I played a game called V Tetris. Like, it was just Tetris. I felt sick.
Yeah.
Why is Tetris making me feel sick?
Yeah, you think they could have at least done like black and white or something. Why red? That's like the worst color to make something in. But I think the reason why VR's kind of taken off more now is that the technology finally got to a point where the technology and the price point that you could produce the technology at what has met in an area where it was actually reasonable to put it out for regular people to buy. Because before like for example the Power Glove like prototype I was talking about, I believe that to make the actual prototype by itself would have been like $10,000 or something per that. So there was no way for them to give that, to put that technology to consumers. So they had to like cut it down so much. And now they finally got to a point where, okay, we can actually release something that's a reasonable virtual reality experience.
So what's interesting is what you've said is that you think the price has come down to a point where regular people can buy it. And so that's interesting, because I think your view is very glass half full. Whereas I'm kind of glass half empty with VR, because the way I see it is that the price came down to a point where regular people thought they could buy it. But what actually happens is you would spend $500 on the headset, and that didn't include the controllers back then. With Vive it was like $600, but it included the controllers. So we're talking like $500 or $600 to get a headset with controllers. And then they have the hidden cost, which is it doesn't run without a PC. And by the way, you need a PC which is at least current generation processor, or at least last generation processor, and a 1060 or above, or a GTX 970 and above. And that was the clincher. It was like, this is a graphics card that's going to cost you $250 to $300 just for the graphics card. You need a PC that holds that graphics card, so you're talking another $300 or $400. And it's not that's not going to be a monster PC. We're talking about a fairly reasonable gaming PC here, but that means your total cost is like $1,200 or $1,300, and people are like, well, I already have a PS4. If you can give me an accessory that's $300, then maybe I'll consider it. Right? They're still on the maybe. At $300 or $600, they're on maybe. $1,200 is like.
Well, let me clarify. I may have misspoke, because I didn't mean to say that it got to a price point where regular people could afford it. I meant it got to a price point where it can be released as a consumer product. It's still, very much. It's, in my opinion, it's still very much in the what do you call it? Early adoption phase. I do not think that VR was ready or is ready even right now for general adoption, like just regular people. And I think that let me just give this one point, and then I'll put it back over to you. Like, that was like my big thing, is that when VR was coming out, there was this big hype train. Like, VR is going to be the next big thing. Like, it's going to take over the world. And I was playing the VR games and like the demos and stuff. I was saying, no, it's not. Like, it's not ready for that. It's just this is the very early adoption phases. This is like the pre-beta, if you put it in like video game terms, you know.
Yeah. And so my question is, whose fault is that? Is that the media, or is that the companies that were making it? Because there was so much competition. They're like, okay, Oculus is releasing this year with the consumer Rift, right? So we need to get consumer Vive out there. And was it those companies actually pushing their product and advertising and saying everyone's going to have VR? Because PSVR came out the same year. So 3 headsets, consumer level pricing for the headset did come out. Like, is it really the fault of the companies, or was it media? Was it all the websites, all the tech websites and the YouTubers going, oh yeah, VR is happening now? It's like, it really isn't, not yet.
Right. I think maybe it's a little bit of both, because like the people producing the VR, they needed developers and like publishers to make games in order to be for their system, but the publishers and the developers don't want to make games for a system that's not being adopted by a huge amount of people. So they kind of wanted it to be adopted by a huge amount of people. So if the media is there, like giving them attention, of course they're going to want to promote it, right?
Yeah. It makes sense because it's the chicken and the egg thing. You need one to make the other continue to grow. But you can't just only have one, right? Right. What I want to know is okay, what's the game that came out recently? Fallout 4?
Fallout 4 and also Doom VFR. Those are AAA games, right?
So Doom VFR is like a special version of Doom, right? Which is a big, already quite popular game. Fallout 4 is an insanely popular game. You can now play the whole thing in VR. Skyrim VR, I think that's on the
PlayStation V. It's already available. It's already on PlayStation VR. I believe there's rumors that it may come to Vive next year, but I don't know if that's confirmed or not.
It had better come to Vive next year.
Yeah, that's not thinking it better, because
I'd be surprised if it didn't.
We all just assume that like PlayStation kind of made a deal to have it come out there first, and they will come out on Vive afterwards. But we don't know if it was like a completely exclusive deal or just like for now. But hopefully, that would be. Most people think it was just like a year ahead of time type of deal where they would
hope so.
VR, then bring it. I'm sure it will come everywhere else. Because have you ever heard of Skyrim not coming out on a system?
No. Yeah, we've already got it on Switch. If it doesn't come out on Steam, that would be a little bit of a surprise.
Right? I mean, it's even on like Game Boy now, isn't it?
Hey, talking of which, I had Metal Gear Solid 1 on Game Boy Color. It was like the whole original game, but on Game Boy Color in 2D. I was like, I remember holding it. I was like, how is this possible? And I thought it was amazing. Anyway, side story. So my question about Doom VFR, Fallout 4, and Skyrim is that a good strategy? Having games which are not designed for VR at full price. So we're talking like $60 for a game which a lot of people have already played, but it's a full AAA title which you can play the whole thing in VR. Is that a good strategy to make VR, to get more people buying it, so that there's more money in the bank for Vive to continue R&D?
Well, I'd say yes, but I have to like kind of clarify. I call it what's the word? I kind of just I mean, not 100% yes, but mostly yes. So I'll just give a quick example of how, for me, I actually got to the point. I've owned the Vive for a year and a half now, maybe 2 years since it came out. I don't remember exactly how long it's been, but I got to a point where I was playing lots of VR games, and those who own VR and have played the games on there, they know that the majority of them are made by either small indie developers, or they're made by an actual company, but it's just like a kind of like testing the water type of thing. So it's maybe like an hour or a 2 hour experience. It's not like a full on game. And after playing tons of those, you get kind of burned out, and you're like, I want something that actually I can play once and want to come back to play again. Not something that's just going to be like the same experience over and over again, like for an hour or 2 hours. I want something that actually builds on itself. So I was getting really bored with VR, and what saved VR for me and what actually got me hooked back into it is a game, Elite Dangerous. I talked to you about it a little bit, but I think a lot of our viewers don't know what that would be. But it's sort of like a space exploration game where you can, and let me say that it was originally a game, just a PC game. It wasn't for VR. So it's a full title, not for VR. It was just like a full space exploration. You could do anything. You could like be a space pirate. You could mine for materials. You could like just be a bounty hunter. You could do anything you want, and you could get hundreds of hours of gameplay through it. And they released that game for VR. And so I played that in VR, and I got completely hooked in that. And I played that for hundreds of hours. So that I got actually most of my VR game experience is probably in that game.
Well, question. So you played hundreds of hours of that game in VR?
Yes. And it's the only game I've ever been able to do that in, because other games I'll start feeling like dizzy after like a half hour or so. But that game, since you're in a cockpit, and it was perfect for VR. I actually bought joysticks for it. So I bought like a joystick and a throttle.
Oh my God, the dream! It's the dream.
Yeah. So like literally when you put that the VR headset on, it's basically like you're putting on your pilot's like your pilot's, what do you call it, helmet. And the moment you put that on, like now I'm in my ship, and like, okay, here's my joystick, here's my joystick, here's my throttle, and let's take off and let's go explore space. And I could just be there like in space, like flying around for like an hour or so, and it would be no big deal.
All right. So for the sake of the viewers, can you explain to people why being in a cockpit helps for VR?
Oh yeah, very good question. So VR's biggest issue is how to handle movement without making you sick, because I don't know how many people know, but motion sickness happens when your brain is kind of confused about the signals that are coming in. So maybe your eyes are telling you that you're moving, but your body is telling you you're not moving. So you start feeling sick. Otherwise, like if you're in the car and your eyes are telling you that you're, well, you get the point. Like when your signals are kind of wires are crossed.
It's like when you're reading a book or playing a video game in the backseat of the car, and then you start to feel sick. It's because your brain doesn't know that you're moving, but you are moving and accelerating and decelerating. That's the problem, isn't it?
Exactly. So like VR, it's that you're not moving, but your brain says that you're moving. Your eyes say that you're moving. So that's crossed. In a car, when you're reading a book, your eyes are saying you're not moving, but then your eardrums are saying you are moving.
Yeah.
So yeah, same thing. So
right. And so how does the cockpit help?
So being in a cockpit, it kind of it gives you what you call like a grounding, where you can see that you're inside like a machine, right? Or like a what do you call it? A vehicle. And so that gives you a grounding that's similar to when you're in a car or whatnot. And also, since for the most part it's always forward movement doesn't really bother you as much as like side to side movement does.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like, because I bought Vive, and if viewers of my channel, Nihongo Gamer, people will remember that I bought the headset, and then there weren't very many VR videos, and that's because I ended up in hospital pretty much like a month later, and we don't really know.
Not because of VR, right?
Yeah, we don't really know if that's because of VR. I don't think it is. From what I've seen from the scans so far, it has nothing to do with the fact that I bought VR. But that's I didn't own it for very long before I ended up kind of living in hospital for a while. So and obviously they weren't going to let me put on a VR headset when I was having like I was dizzy and stuff at the time. So
wouldn't suggest it.
Yeah, it would not really would have helped it, I think.
But so one thing I want to say about that is that game, it was VR. It was made, so it wasn't released specifically for VR. The non-VR game was made playable in VR. So I think that's a good qualifier, because you were talking about how Fallout is. I mean, that's a big title. It definitely will bring new people into the VR space, maybe as they want to try this game in VR. But what sucks is if you already own Fallout 4, to have to buy it again for VR, especially at full price, that seems like a bit of a, you know.
See, that's what got me, because there was the Steam Winter Sale, and I thought Fallout 4, that's a game that I've always wanted to play. It was at a really good price. But then I thought, hey, when I get back to Japan, I do have a Vive. I will want to buy it. I will want to buy Fallout 4 VR, and I don't want to buy it twice. So I just didn't buy it at all. I'm still waiting until until either one, I get back to Japan, or two, the price comes down for Fallout 4 VR, which I think is prohibitively expensive at the moment. I think people who have already shelled out all that money for VR, we're already the early adopters, right?
Yep.
If you punish your early adopters by giving them full price games, which most of them have already bought before, so they're paying like upwards of $100 just so that they can own 2 copies of this game, one for VR. Like, are those the people you really want to be punishing? And they're not punishing on purpose, but it feels like punishment as a consumer. Like, I don't know if that's the right strategy.
Because, like, for example, Skyrim, they came out with the special edition of Skyrim, and they gave that to me for free because I already owned the old Skyrim. And I was really happy. Like, oh, Bethesda, that's awesome of you guys. You gave it to me for free because I already owned your stuff, so you're kind of like supporting your fan base, right? That's great. So then Fallout 4 comes out, and it's like, well, now you have to buy it again, and it's going to be full price. And in Japan, I think it's actually more than full price. I don't know if it's just the conversion rate, but it's like $80 in yen, it's like 8,000 yen. I think I heard it's only like 60 outside of Japan, but in Japan, it's
And considering the fact that I don't think that consumer VR has taken off anywhere near as quickly in Japan. I feel like in the West, at least, they've got a lot of tech YouTubers who've got their setups. They've even got, some of them are setting up, virtual cameras inside their settings so that they can, see themselves in VR and have not just, because the problem is with, especially as YouTubers, if you put the camera view where you're looking, again, it's this sickness thing. It's like, okay, the screen makes me look like I'm moving, but I'm personally not moving. And even though it's on a screen, I still feel a bit sick.
Right, like there's just a new software. This actually might be another kind of boost for Vive in particular, and maybe VR in general. I don't know if it's available for Oculus. Hey, I think it is actually available for Oculus as well. But there's a thing called VR Chat, and it's a free software. And I actually see a lot of people doing YouTube videos of them being in VR Chat and just going around talking to people and stuff. And it looked kind of interesting to me, but I can't watch more than 5 minutes because it gives me motion sickness to watch a YouTube video.
Is it done from the point of view? Is it done from the point of view of someone who's actually in the chat, or do you get to be like a third party?
So the videos that I've seen, it's actually the person in the game. So you see their point of view, so it's constantly moving around. So, and that's the other thing. Go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, even the video that I made for VR, I was like, well, I'm really glad that I made a VR video, but I don't want to make any more until I've found a way to make a third-party camera. So that it's not from my point of view, because it just makes me kind of feel a bit unwell just looking at my own video.
Right? You can't even edit it.
I can't even edit the video.
You're like, oh, my head hurts. And that's the thing that sucks for me, is I want to do like a whole series of VR videos, because like I was playing like every other VR game, and I wanted to like give my my reviews of them all, but then I couldn't think of a way that I could put that on YouTube that I would feel all right with, because I know that I want to be able to watch my own video, and if my own video makes me motion sick, I don't want to have other people watch that.
Exactly. Yeah, if you're editing your own content, you're like, this doesn't make me want to watch more of this, then you don't even really want to finish the edit, really.
Right.
So something I find interesting is like, okay, so VR hasn't really taken off the way that the media thought it was going to.
Right.
But do you think that on the timeline that Vive, that Steam, what is it? Is it Steam? It's Valve. That Valve, Facebook, and Sony, the timeline that they predicted, do you think they're actually on that timeline, or do you think it's even slower than what the manufacturers had hoped for?
It's hard to say what exactly that they hoped for, because I don't know what all their expectations. But
I'm not really sure what they were hoping for.
But from what I watch, I look at the VR news on like the Japanese 4Gamer site and stuff, and it seems like most people are still pretty positive about it. Like a lot of people, like, I don't know, so it's hard to say if it didn't go as they're expected, they're just trying to cover up and say like, oh no, it's still okay, or if this is always what they expected and they're just saying, oh, this is exactly how it's supposed to happen. But it seems like things are actually, from what I've heard, a lot of people think it's actually progressing better than they expected. So especially in terms of technology, because now the price of Oculus has gone down a lot. Vive, I don't think has gone down that much. It went down maybe a little bit, but the Vive is coming out with a wireless wireless
Oh yeah, that's gonna be big. Yeah.
not a wireless headset, but a wireless adapter for the Vives that they have right now. And I think that was
Mm.
really cool because instead of releasing a whole new VR that you have to buy, you could just buy the adapter for the Vive that you already have, and now you can have it wireless, which is another big barrier for general adoption, because I think the original headsets that they had were kind of clunky for the average user. It was you have the wire sticking out, you have a very clunky like headset, and they're slowly like building they're slowly making that better, and then they're coming out with the new VR with a higher resolution as well, right?
Vive Pro, right?
Yeah, right.
So since we're on the topic of price, and I think anyone watching this will be interested in the prices because they might own it, they may be planning to buy one in the future if they don't own it, or they might be planning on upgrading. Like how much are we looking for the three main ones right now? Is there a way to look that up quickly?
Yeah,
There's PlayStation VR.
Find that out.
Oh, sorry, lost my headphone. PlayStation VR, Rift. It is just called Rift. Is it called Rift Touch now because it comes with the controllers? And then there's Vive.
I think the Rift Touch might be the name of the controller. I'm not sure.
I think just by standard it just comes with the controllers now, I think.
Oh really? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
See if we could get a recent price comparison. From my memory, I know that, and my pricing might be a little off because I look at from Japan, and I know that Japan actually might be a little bit more pricey because there's like an import cost and things. But so according to this GameSpot article, how recent is this? Oh no, this is way too old. Sorry, I'm looking for another article. This is 2016. We need a more recent.
I have a funny feeling that at the end of the summer 2017, Rift had come down to 350, including touch controllers.
Oh yeah, 350. That sounds about right. Yeah,
that would have been that was pounds or dollars. I don't know, but something like 350, 400. Yeah, which I think is quite reasonable. But here's the other barrier, right? We've got
the computer, right?
You need to have a good graphics card, and it's not just that those are expensive. The problem is that people who mine cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, but they're not even using it to play games, which is fine. They can do whatever they want with it, but it has inadvertently risen the cost
of graphic cards to go up.
Graphics cards. I've heard it's gone up like nearly a factor of 2. Like sometimes it's double the price.
Yeah, I was really lucky because I bought mine before that all happened.
I must have bought mine right before it happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hopefully that will go down because the thing about the cryptocurrency mining, as far as I understand it, is that the more people that do it, the better. Okay, the more people that do it, the higher specs you need to actually make money off of it. So it quickly got to the point where just a good gaming PC was no longer good enough to make money off of cryptocurrency mining. So now you actually need like a dedicated I guess I don't want to say computer, but like a dedicated device. Yeah, it's not like they have like these boxes. I think it's called like an ant miner or something. I don't remember, but like they have like a box it's basically a PC without a monitor or anything. It's just this device that's solely made for mining cryptocurrency, and that's all it does. So it does it so much faster than anything else, and that beats the pants off of just a gaming PC. So it's getting to the point where it's getting. So I would hope that eventually it would stop. How you say it, that the graphic cards would be less of an issue, and so maybe the prices would drop down again, but who knows.
All right, so on that topic of computers without monitors, I did hear about this one rumor last year where they were saying that they might in the future rent out machinery to heat your house. So a computer without a monitor. So instead of having like a radiator or a central heating system, they would like rent out these computers which just mine cryptocurrency or do calculations on the stars or whatever. And that machine is so hot it's giving off heat to your house. And then you actually get paid because you're letting them use your electricity and run it in your house.
So like you can have a heater that doesn't cost you money. That'd be nice.
Exactly. Yeah, because in a way, like server rooms are all filled with fans, right? So they're spending all this electricity to 1, run the computer, and then 2, run fans to keep the whole thing cool. Why don't we just put all these servers in people's homes and use them to heat people's houses?
Right.
That could be the future of VR. We might be having to wait because what I see as the issue with VR is that not one person has done something wrong, but just there's at least 5 or 6 factors which have to be all in alignment. Like the planets have to come like this, right?
Yep.
They all have to match. Otherwise, VR is not going to take off. Either way, VR will happen.
Right.
It just, is it going to be next year or is it going to be in 20 years? And it could very conceivably happen with a delay of 20 years, just because people forget about it. But we want it to happen this year or next year. Right. And for that to happen, we need cryptocurrency to stop being a thing. We need manufacturers to reduce
cryptocurrency to change, where they don't need to
just change. And then we need manufacturers to bring down the prices and stop punishing the people. Again, I don't think they're doing it on purpose, but it does feel like punishment if you're an early adopter.
Right.
We do need. I think we need to have. I think I like the idea of arcades. So I think arcades, consoles, and PCs all need to kind of come up with promising packages. Like arcades can't cost $50 for a couple hours, $30 for a couple hours. That sort of stuff has to come down. Like all these planets need to come into alignment.
And just to expand upon those points, like one was the cryptocurrency thing, though. Like another way it could go is that maybe cryptocurrency needs, like maybe the next generation of graphic boards come out, and the cryptocurrency needs the next generation or even something better than that in order to mine with. And so then maybe the generation before that will be cheaper,
like
and it could be used for So that's another. Cryptocurrency doesn't have to go away. Just the kind of situation with the graphic boards have to change.
It's like this race. It's like we're all trying to walk around the streets, but this marathon is kind of happening at the same time. But if they would just speed up and move to like the GTX 1090 or whatever future card. We can all have our 1080s back at a regular price. I'd like that.
And the other thing I want to talk about or like add to was the amusement park thing, because this is something I thought was really cool. I went to United Studios Japan.
Universal.
That's I was like, something doesn't sound right. Yeah, Universal Studios Japan. So I went to Universal Studios Japan, and they had this Evangelion ride, which I thought was awesome. It was a roller coaster. We actually sit into the roller coaster seats, but the roller coaster goes into a tunnel. And so if you were to just ride that roller coaster as is, you would see absolutely nothing. Just be black space, because you're just flying through a tunnel. But before you go in there, they put a Galaxy VR headset on you.
That's amazing. Okay.
You ride through the tunnel and you're in VR space, and so in VR, your body's actually physically moving on a roller coaster. But in the VR space, you're riding like this like spaceship thing, or not really a spaceship, but like a ship, and you're flying in between like Evangelion, like what are they? They're not called robots, right? What are they called? Well, monsters or whatnot, like fighting each other and like hitting each other and everything. And you're flying in between that. And what's really cool is that it's not like your general amusement park thing where you have a screen in front of you is kind of immersive. It's a really big screen, but with the VR, you could actually fly through like a monster's legs and then look behind you, and you can see it behind you.
Still see it.
Yeah.
That is definitely something that I think, if anyone's working on it, it's probably Disney, right? They're probably trying to find a way to upgrade Star Tours, which is the main one at Disney, where it's like you're in a flight simulator and it does feel a bit VR. But probably in the very near future, I'm sure we'll have a headset that changes that, because especially with Star Wars, and I don't want to turn this podcast into a chat about Star Wars, because that could last another 3 days.
Yeah.
A long time in the galaxy miles away.
Yep.
I think with Star Wars, Disney loves to do things right now. They're just like, okay, we bought Star Wars, let's make a movie right now.
Let's throw money at it.
In fact, we'll do the sequel first. Like they're moving so fast that it's like things are probably going to start happening in the wrong order, right?
Right.
I think if anyone's going to upgrade the VR experience in the arcades, like that sort of amusement park thing, I think it'll probably be Star Tours at Disneyland.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool.
Like, Japan has their own Disneyland. It could be the Japanese one that does it. Who knows?
Yeah, I hope so. It's like I was thinking about it. I mean, I'm not an expert, but you look at the non-VR rides, especially at Universal Studios and stuff, and there's like they have to make like actually like walls and stuff that look like certain things, and they have like screens like all over the place, and you have like different like explosions, and there's tons of stuff that probably cost a lot of money to do outside of VR. And I imagine that just giving a Galaxy headset to each person riding would be cheaper than that. So I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a question about the experience that you went on. So you all had Galaxy headsets on. Does the roller coaster actually move, or is it just a simulator that just kind of shudders forward and makes you think you're moving?
So that's what I was talking about. The tunnel is that it actually is a roller coaster. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily have to do that. You could just have a simulator that just causes like a vector acceleration to make your body feel like you're moving. I'm sure that would work just as well. But the one that I went on, it was actually your body is actually moving on a roller coaster, but the roller coaster is going through a closed off tunnel.
Because also, again, coming back to the discussion about Disney, they have Space Mountain, which, if I remember correctly, Space Mountain happens in the pitch black, right?
Yeah, I think there's little lights to make it feel like you're in space, but it's pretty dark.
So we're gonna move from a couple strobe lights in a dark room to you're in space with just nothing but like a Galaxy headset. They could already do it right now.
Yeah, I think that they definitely could. So that's one thing area that I think VR could be successful. So, but I'm curious if they're doing anything like that outside of Japan, because I've only seen like those amusement VR places in Japan more. I don't know.
I like that. You know, I like the story. I like the storyline that's happening here, because Japan hasn't really been first for anything in the past decade almost. Because after gaming really did shift slowly past 10 years towards the West. For example, the game that I've been playing a lot on my channel, Dragon Ball Fighters, right? Dragon Ball. So this is a Japanese manga which becomes an anime. It is so intensely popular for kids in America that they like it so much that it comes out in America first, right?
Oh yeah. Japan, I think I saw that on your live stream, right? Yeah. Were you doing a live stream of that?
Yeah. All of Japan gets this game, which, you know, is a franchise that they created. It's coming out a week later, and someone did mention to me on Twitter, maybe it's because they didn't want to release it at the same time as Monster Hunter World, which could be it. They just don't want to like clash.
And Monster Hunter World hasn't come out outside of Japan?
No, Monster Hunter World was a worldwide release everywhere.
Okay. So I guess it was okay to compete with Monster Hunter World outside of Japan, but not in Japan, right?
Right. They were like, yeah, sure. You know what? Namco must have been like, yeah, we'll compete with Monster Hunter World. We'll take them head on in the West, and then Monster Hunter World ships 5 million units. It's like, oh, maybe we should have released a week later. But the storyline is that America really has taken it so far that I'm seeing indie games. Like, have you seen there's an indie game about managing Power Rangers? You like manage your own Super Sentai group, right?
Wow.
This is completely made by foreigners. It looks incredibly authentic. The music's good, the graphics are good. It's like the West is doing Japan better than Japan. And so finally, it feels like the storyline is kind of coming back. Because last year we had Nier, we had Final Fantasy 15, we had all of these giant Japanese franchises coming back. And then now with arcades still exist here, here in Japan. Right. And then with amusement centers coming up with arcade VR, it's almost like Japan has finally found something that they can excel in again, and better than the rest of the world.
Right. So that is definitely a good thing. Japan needs to start pushing the envelope a little bit more in many areas, I think. Because the reality of the situation is, if they don't come up with something kind of unique, that game developers will continue to shut down in Japan, or they'll all continue to move over to the mobile space, which again isn't a bad thing. It's just that it's a little bit unsustainable right now. There's too many of the same game. even if they go to the mobile space too, I think it's not super sustainable in my opinion, because it seems like most of the companies are just doing the same thing. There's not many people trying to do new things. They're all like, well, this is what's popular, let's just keep copying this. And that could be a whole nother stream about like Japanese games and the Japanese industry in general. But I think it's been about an hour maybe or close to it. So
probably.
Let's see if have we hit our main points. Let's say real quick, what VR games, if any, have you played that you thought were really good games that you want to see more like?
I didn't have a lot of experience apart from the stuff that Steam gives you.
Yep. Like the lab.
To be honest, I'll tell you what, the first barrier for me, first of all, was not having a PC. So once I finally got a computer that runs VR, and then I waited a couple months, and then HTC Vive came down $100 or $150. So I bought that. So I have this significant investment money-wise in HTC Vive. And then I go on Steam, and it's like, okay, so Fallout 4 VR is coming out next month. It'll be, $60, and then Doom VFR. It'll be like a cut-down version of Doom, right? It won't even be the full game. And you're like, I already have no money. And so you start looking for free alternatives or cheap alternatives.
Yep.
And I'll be honest, the last thing I played in VR before I ended up in hospital, and it was about 3 days later. Again, I really don't think that it was the fault of me. I really don't think it was.
Right.
I was playing a free golf game, and it made me really upset in a way, because I was like, this is not... If I actually showed this to a friend, if I said, let's play some VR, hey, look, this is free, let's try it. That friend would probably be like, this is awful, let's never do this again.
Right. I think I might have played that game.
Yeah. You may have played that one. I played it, and I was like, the golf club, they were just like, press the touchpad left to change the size of the stick. I was like, well, that's intuitive. It was like, to start the game, whack the ball in the middle. It's like, okay, well, that's novel, but there's no connect. It's like, why am I whacking some ball over there, which has nothing to do with golf, and then you like reappear on the course, which you could have walked to. Actually, they could have said you could just walk to hole number 1. We all understand how teleport works. They're like, no, hit the ball, and then you like magically appear, and then the ball kept getting lost, and you can't tee off another ball until you go and find the original one.
What?
I was like, what? No, I actually looked around. I was like, there's got to be a reset option. Like, ball's lost. I want another ball here. There was no option. I had to walk and find the ball, which was clipped. It had clipped. The clipping wasn't done correctly, so it was like inside some object somewhere. I was like, if I just whack it a few times, maybe the ball will come. And I was like, you know what? I should just pay. I should just pay for games.
Yeah, like I think that's like a big thing for me. The whole like movement, because movement is an issue in VR. So I think you should try to minimize useless movement as much as possible. So I hate when games like have just things like annoying things like that you have to do. Like you have to walk and find the ball after you hit it. Like I should just be able to press a button and have the ball come back to me, or like it shouldn't be like you should avoid these things and make it more streamlined. But anyways,
I think something that's been missed with some of the indie developers is that they've been given guidelines. They're like, it's got to be super realistic. If the ball gets lost, you need to go and find it.
Right.
Whereas what they seem to have missed out on is that most of the people who can afford to buy VR are people who have played video games for a minimum of 20 years.
Right.
So we get it.
Right.
We know what a start menu is. We know what an Amusement is, what reset does. This is all stuff we're familiar with. VR doesn't mean we've become stupid again.
Right. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with like teaching you from the beginning if you are kind of introducing a completely new UI system. Because another thing that I think good VR usually does is it, instead of having screens, you have the inventory or the kind of UI be in the physical worlds. Like I physically have like a sword on my side and a shield on my back or whatnot. So I think
that helps with immersion. Yeah.
Right. So I think there are different ways they could do it, and they could teach you that a little bit at a time. But the problem is that right now with VR, there's so many just kind of like small published games, like small developing teams that are making games for VR, that you have to sift through the games to find the good ones. And there's a lot of bad ones, and then some of them that are really bad that may actually make you feel sick from playing them. So it's kind of like a risky thing to do. But there are good ones there though if you look for them, I'd say.
It's interesting. What annoys me is I don't think that it's going along the same path as mobile, because I remember when mobile games first came out, even though some of them were a bit weird, they always felt novel and like they kind of worked. So for example, I think the big one was a free one that you could play on the iPhone. It was called Labyrinth or something, and you rolled around like a steel ball. You had to get it into the hole at the end, right? It was like, it was free. It was incredibly simple. Technology, the accelerometer thing had just happened, and people found a way to make it work quite quickly in a free experience. But what gets me about Vive is that because of the amount of work that it does take and considered planning that it takes to create a VR experience that doesn't make people sick, it's difficult to get those free apps, which is what really helped the iPhone work. The fact that so many of them were free and workable and playable, like I think that really helped the App Store, because now we're like, $10.99 for an app? Yeah, I'll pay that. If it's going to be a good app, I'll pay that. But you couldn't have done that when it first came out. If you'd said $10.99, people were like, I'll have the light version. Remember when that was a thing? It was like something light. Demos were a thing.
Right. I actually like demos though. Like for me, that I don't like the free to play model because I don't like what it does to Like but that's a whole other topic for another video, I think, of getting into like the free to play model and the like gotcha boxes and whatnot, loot boxes and stuff like that. But
we definitely have a series. We definitely have a series here, I think.
Right. Yeah. We have to come up with a couple topics here. Yeah.
If we just go back and write down all the things that we didn't have time to talk about today, we can put those into future episodes for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, definitely. I think we have at least like 3 or 4 videos that we came up with already. But I feel like there was.
But to answer your main question before we like branch off again.
Yes.
What does VR need to succeed?
Yep. So, good question.
In the event that Valve, Oculus, and Facebook and Sony watch this video and they go, yeah, this is going to tell us what we need. What would we tell them that they need?
Well, so what did we come out with already? So you mentioned that you need to first, I guess, the price point needs to come down, right? And the other problem is the graphics board is how that's going to work out, is how available like strong PCs are going to be for people. But eventually, I think eventually PCs will go down. The general price of powerful PCs will go down enough where the most powerful PCs won't be necessary for VR anymore. Maybe you could just do like a mid-range PC could still do VR in the future. So
yeah, standalone VR is coming out as well this year. A number of manufacturers are coming up with sort of $300 standalone headsets, aren't they?
Right. So I think this is maybe a part where maybe our views may be a little bit different, because for me, I feel like the way it is right now, I think it's fine. and I think another it's kind of not exactly answering the question directly, but for me, my kind of counter question would be, does Steam need to be like, how you say it? Does it have to take off, I guess? Because I think earlier you were saying like, when is it going to take off? And for me, I think I'm all right if it's just a niche thing. Like, it doesn't have to be that every gamer is playing on VR anymore. Playing VR in the future. For me, you could have regular gamers playing on PC, and you got people playing mobile, and then VR could just be another niche, and I would be all right with that.
I like that. So your answer to the question, what does VR need to succeed, is VR doesn't need to succeed.
It just needs to survive. For me, as long as it survives.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that's why
we can change the title of the video.
Well, no, the title is what it needs to survive, because you suggested succeed or survive, and I went with survive because for me, as long as it survives, that's good enough for me. Even if it's not, because like, for example, I think the golden age of gaming in general was back in the day when games were made by gamers for niche gaming people, and we were all our niche group. And a lot of the issues we had recently with like with loot boxes and all that stuff is because now it's not just gamers who are making games, it's big conglomerate companies that just want to make money off of the games, right?
That is definitely an issue. I remember the days when you remember when you would put the disc in, and then you would have to put disc 2 in. Do you remember you had to like put at least 4 or 5 discs in before it had loaded everything into the RAM? And then there would be a little box that would say, "This game is shareware." Shareware. That was a word back then. Please.
What does that mean again?
I think it means like, please share with as many people as possible, isn't it?
Right.
And then, ideally, there would be a version that you could also buy as well.
Oh yeah, for shareware. Yep.
All right. So my, if I may just suggest what I think VR needs to survive.
Yep.
It would be what has worked for videos on YouTube and what I think has worked for mobile, which is VR needs to be something that people share with other people. I think if people don't share it, then it could end up the way that the PS Vita did, because everyone on PS Vita said, I don't really care if it succeeds as long as they keep making the stuff that I like. But the problem is, to create a console that powerful, with that good battery life, with that good form factor, Sony needs to make an investment. And if it doesn't return on their investment, it could disappear. And unfortunately with Vita, it actually did. So this is coming from like a console space. The way I see it is that actually my answer to the question, what does VR need to survive, is VR does need to survive. Otherwise, it will disappear. So it probably won't.
Do you mean it needs to succeed to survive, is what you mean?
No, I think it needs to survive. At least, at very least, it needs to survive if it's going to survive. I know that sounds like a recursive, silly thing to say, but what I mean is, like, if it just sits there with the niche and only satisfies the niche, it could disappear entirely and not survive.
So do you mean
I
it needs
think-
to progress, I guess, in a way?
I think it does need to progress, and I think it needs to survive. I think it needs to not just survive; it needs to succeed at some sort of minimum level on a consumer level,
right?
In order to survive at all, because of the amount of money and time that it requires from corporations.
So here's a question: does it need to be promoted by AAA companies, or could it survive through indie games or indie studios?
Well, that's a really good question. I think from what I've seen so far, and I think a lot of my VR experience, because I only had it for a very short time, also comes from watching people on YouTube and showing what they've been able to do with it. I think that it doesn't have to be the AAA stuff, actually. I think that's definitely going to help. But just with indie stuff, if they could get their act together, come up with some demos that don't suck, like the golf game that I played, if they could get their act together and make something that's simple, that people share with other people, and I mean bring Vive to their friend's house and show them, or invite people over to do it, or even with PlayStation VR. And this is something that a lot of people talk about on YouTube as well, is creating multiplayer experiences, because I think you also mentioned it earlier. It's like something that's not happening is a lot of shared multiplayer stuff in the same like shared multiplayer stuff where I'm playing the game and there's also people in the room and we're playing together. Right. I think that is definitely an important next step. Because right now it does the opposite of what a lot of gaming does, which is it makes you reclude a little bit.
Because you're in your own world. You kind of put this.
There's no way to see the other people unless you put a camera on the front, which could help. Of course, people are making use of it a lot.
And of course, you can see other people that are in other places in the same VR space, right? So like with the VR chat now, you can have you could go to a virtual space with your friends that have VR, and you could be you have your avatar and they have their avatar, and you could talk together. And I think even with VR chat, another cool thing is that you don't have to have VR to play it. So you could have I could have my wife on her computer in VR chat, and I could be in VR, and we could both be in the same virtual space too. So they are making some moves, but it's not to the same extent where if you go to a VR area where you can actually have like everyone in VR and also be in the same physical space at the same time. It's not quite there yet.
Absolutely. I think maybe what you've come up with probably is the solution, is if we can make VR an opt-in experience, as opposed to an exclusive experience. Because if VR chat is Galaxy only or Vive only or Oculus only, that's what you call exclusion. It actually excludes more people than it includes. But if you create something like Google Hangouts and there's a little VR button in the corner, right, and then anyone who's got VR could enjoy it in VR, and
and I think
see all of the other people as just what's it? When you have the Jedi Council, like I even if they don't know that they look like that in VR, I'd be like, I'd be fine with it. I'd be like, there's over there. And
that goes back to like what I was talking about, where I got hooked back into VR through Elite Dangerous, where Elite Dangerous, it was like most of I would fly in a wing of co-pilots, and we'd be out like in space, and a lot of the time I was the only one in VR. Other people would be on their PC, or like they would have like some other setup. Like I think it was also a PlayStation and Xbox, I think was also released for. So it was the same game, but it just there was many ways to access it, and I think that made it more accessible and to a wider audience, rather than it being this is only for Vive or this is only for Oculus. And especially for multiplayer stuff, like so a lot of VR multiplayer games died really quickly because it was they had really good concepts, like, oh, this is going to be this great VR game where you're doing like a shooter arena or something, and then you log in and it takes like a half hour to find someone else to play with.
Gosh, I think you're absolutely right, especially if you think of online gaming as a giant MMO. So not like thinking about MMOs, but if you imagine just everyone in their house is already a character and we're all a part of the world MMO. Having the VR guy or the VR girl join your team could be a bit like having a healer, right? It's like, hey, we need to go on a mission, but we don't have a healer. Let's put out like a call for VR people, right? So it's sort of like we need a VR person because we need someone who has the flexibility to, I don't know, target people from a turret or something in the middle, and they could use their VR headset and it would be more accurate.
Right.
If it were like that, it would encourage people to find, you could do a call for people who have a VR headset. It would encourage people to go out and buy one themselves so they could be that person. They'd be like, hey, it's the VR guy. We need the guy in the chair. Have you seen Spider-Man 2 yet?
Yeah. Lisa, the
And
guy
not
in the
Spider-Man
chair.
2, Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yep.
The guy in the chair, right? If you get to be the guy in the chair, it's quite
Mhm.
exciting. I would go out and buy a VR headset if it meant that it would
Yep.
give me a reason to be the guy in the chair.
I want to be the guy in the chair. You know, I want to buy VR.
Yeah, I like how he at first. I mean, this is no spoilers, but
Yep.
with the guy in the chair, it's like, don't need a guy in the chair. It's like, and then later,
Yeah.
I need a guy in the chair. I need a guy in the chair. He is.
Right.
Just on your point about opting in with
Yep.
chat, it's my arcade stick, right?
Yep.
And a lot of people don't play with this anymore.
Right.
At first, it was like a must. You couldn't play fighting games without it. If you didn't have one, you were looked at as a bit of a phony, right?
Right.
And then people started actually changing games, changing the way that inputs went in, like the amount of delay and lag that goes in, to the point that it didn't actually benefit you to have one of these arcade sticks. You could play with a controller or you could play with an arcade stick, and it was personal preference. And I think that's what's happened. People were worried that arcades were dying. People were worried that the arcade stick was also going to die. They're like, no, everyone needs to play with an arcade stick. And then when they finally realized arcade sticks could be an opt-in thing, that's where it's like its happy medium. As long as we have enough manufacturers who can make enough money still making them, then it can just be opt-in and it doesn't die out.
Right.
And with Dragon Ball Fighters, which just came out yesterday in Japan, but also a week ago everywhere else.
Right.
I've played it with controller and with an arcade stick, and it's offered no benefit playing on an arcade stick. It was as fun, it was as easy to control and as enjoyable on controller or on arcade stick. So if I can't plug the arcade stick in and I want to play at like 1 a.m. and I don't want to wake people up, you know, smashing all these buttons,
just use your gamepad. Right?
Yeah, I don't feel bad. I'm like, oh yeah, I can play this on a control pad. It'll be exactly the same.
Right.
And I think that's something that could totally work for VR if it were opt-in, especially with online games. If you know, the guy with the VR headset wants to play with this headset, sure.
Right. And obviously there are some games that VR wouldn't be able to play, like you wouldn't be able to play Street Fighter with VR, really. I mean, you could, but it wouldn't really help you. It wouldn't be that great, right?
Yeah.
So the same type of thing, but that's the same type of thing where with your arcade stick, you wouldn't play Call of Duty with an arcade stick, right? Unless you want to punch yourself.
No, you wouldn't. But I think you've just hit on a really good point.
Yep.
People who have VR could use that as an opt-in way to spectate as well, because I'm certain that there are thousands more people watching Street Fighter than there are playing it.
Right. For
whatever reason, they can't get good enough to play it, or just because watching it actually kind of is more fun than playing it sometimes.
Yep.
If you could choose anywhere in the arena to watch the match, so you can watch it from any angle you want, then then you're really glad that you own a VR headset at that point.
On Valve, they had a VR Dota, like you could they had like a free download where you could watch Dota games in VR. Do you know what Dota is?
Yeah, what I did, but I didn't hear about this. When did this happen?
Yep. It came out a long time ago, but probably the reason why you never heard about it is when it came out, I was so hyped. I'm like, oh my god, we're gonna be able to actually be in an arena looking down on the Dota game, and we could maybe move it around like on the table, we could move it around virtually and see
you could watch from a rooftop if you wanted, or you could watch from someone's helmet cam or something.
But then I downloaded it, I got into it, and you know what it was? You go into a room and you have a big screen that you watch VR. That you watch the game on. The room is VR. I'm like, this is so not what I was expecting.
And it's so disappointing when you see something executed in completely different way to the way that you would have done it yourself. And I know it's difficult because we're gamers, and I know that you're sometimes developing, but we're not working on the Dota team, right? And you watch something that big and you go, oh, come on. Come on, there was a much more obvious solution, and it wasn't this.
And obviously that solution was the quick solution, but there's no reason why they couldn't do what we were imagining, because I mean, all it really is, it's a 3D, you already have the 3D space, right? And the game is a 3D environment. All you need to do is put a camera in there that you can control in VR and move that camera around. And that's you go.
All you need to do. Yeah, exactly. There's really no explanation for it, because our own PC, as long as we're receiving the position data of everything, we can still render it all on our machine. So it's not like it's going to be any extra work for them.
Although the only
You
other
know,
thing I might think is
sometimes
maybe it might maybe a bandwidth issue because you have the data the data of the actual game being played at the same time as your data. But I don't know. I don't think that would be too big of an issue for a big company like Valve. I don't know.
right, exactly. Yeah, I can see where it's obviously more complicated than we think,
Yeah,
but it's a
it should
massive
still be doable.
missed opportunity. It
Yep.
should be doable.
Yep.
From everything I know about games and development, it should be doable.
Yep. But yeah, like
But
stuff like that, I think is a good thing that VR should do to succeed is making it more accessible in like a wider area where it's not just VR games only, but other things that you could opt into through a VR experience. And I think that's definitely part of the recipe for success.
I think if anything, they're on the right track for all the
Yep.
things that we've probably suggested today. Actually, I think the wheels, the cogs are in motion.
Right.
I think if opt-in VR is going to be a big thing, like especially with people spectating on Twitch, like I think Twitch like grew like 100%, like it like doubled last year, like after the summer or something.
Wow, can you imagine if
spectating?
Yeah, I was just saying, if you can imagine if like Twitch had like a Twitch VR thing where like it's official like Twitch like software that you could go into VR and watch Twitch matches or something, like how
I would do. I wouldn't play games anymore.
Right.
I would just watch other people's games from wherever I want to stand. That would be amazing.
Yeah, and that could be you could do that could be done through Vive, through Oculus, or even just for like Galaxy VR or anything, because you don't necessarily have to have a controller necessarily, because it's a spectating thing, right? So
and the more you watch, the more you are going to want to play the game eventually anyway.
Yep,
that
so
seems to be what happens on Twitch anyway.
Yeah,
because everyone's watching stuff on Twitch, and then suddenly game sales start to go up. It's like I think the spectating thing is helping games clearly,
definitely.
money-wise.
Yep.
But
so
the good thing that I've seen this year is that cheaper headsets are coming out.
Right. And also getting rid of wires, I think, will make it a much more streamlined experience. So I'm pretty positive. That's why I think staying the course as it is right now, I still see hope. But I don't.
Yeah, I'm more positive than I was at the start of the chat, because often when I talk to you about VR, I'm kind of like they're not doing what they need to do.
Right.
And I still think they're not doing a lot of things that they need to do.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's at a point where it's going to disappear the way that the Vita did. And it's really awful to always, every time we talk about failure, we always bring up the Vita. I think that's an unfair thing that I do, and it's a bad habit. But
don't pull a Vita.
Exactly. But it does happen. You know, Dreamcast happened and then it disappeared. Vita happened and then it disappeared. And these are things that I think kill companies. You know, companies go down. Sega's like, wow, that console bombed, and now we're never going to make a console ever again. And you're like, whoa, don't do stuff like that. That's kind of heartbreaking. Yeah, and it would be heartbreaking to see either Oculus or Vive disappear. Yep. I don't really care about PlayStation VR. I mean, from what I've seen so far, I'm like, I don't know, maybe. Like I saw it came back in stock, and I was like, no, it came back in stock, and I saw some running videos and demos, and I know that you have to experience it to really see what it is. But from what I saw, I was like, I don't want to play that.
Well, I've actually tried it. At work, and I mean I think it's decent for people who want just a VR experience. But for someone from the standpoint of having played Vive, it's just not up to what I expect from my virtual experiences. It doesn't have the amount of like feedback of your positioning, and also a lot of the games are made to be played sitting down with a controller. And for me, if I'm sitting down with a controller, then I just want to play on a TV monitor or something. I don't really need it to be in VR space for a lot of those.
It's a bit like when 3D movies came out. You know, you put the glasses on, and you're like, yeah, it's 3D, and then 15 minutes later, you're like, is it still in 3D? You have to like take the glasses off to check. You're like, oh yeah, it is in 3D. It's like, wait, why is it in 3D? If we're gonna forget that it's in 3D, if death just becomes natural, then then I want to also be able to turn my head. I also want to experience the movie from any angle that I want, which would be awful. But.
And I haven't tried Skyrim on PlayStation, but my friend at work did, and he said it made him sick. And I'm not sure.
You haven't tried Skyrim in what? In VR?
Oh, I'm sorry, in PlayStation VR. I haven't tried the PlayStation VR Skyrim yet, but my friend at work did, and he said it made him sick. And I don't know if it's because like he's just not good at he's really sensitive to VR. Maybe he gets sick very quickly, or maybe the frame rate and things aren't as good on PlayStation as they would have been on Vive. I don't know. I've also heard other people say that it was really hard to shoot an arrow because with the PlayStation Move controllers, they would like hold it out and the virtual arrow would be be jittering around, and they couldn't like actually. So now don't quote me on this. This is just what I've heard from other people. So I haven't played the game myself, so I'm not saying that it's not as good. But my general impression of PlayStation VR was that it doesn't have the precision that Vive and Oculus had when I tried it.
And I think Sony is aware of that. I think Sony knows that they just need to get as many people to have the headset as possible before they start saying, okay, buy a second sensor. Because clearly one of the biggest issues is that they're only using that one dual camera at the front. But if you don't put it in a separate spot, then there's going to be occlusion, right? You're not going to be able to see the one behind. That's probably why it's shaking.
Yeah, so PlayStation VR could be just as good possibly if they just get some another sensor and maybe new controllers instead of using the really old like PlayStation Move controllers. I could see it definitely could push the technology forward, but I guess maybe they're saying they just wanted people to adopt as quickly as possible, right?
It's really positive because what I saw with Microsoft when they released Surface Pro 3, like it was struggling. They came up with Surface 1 and they're like Windows RT, and everyone's like, what? It was about as confusing as when Windows NT came out. Do you remember? Do you remember Windows 2000? It's like, yeah, it's the sequel to Windows 98. It's like, no, it's not. It's the sequel to Windows NT, and it didn't play any game. Windows 2000 was just this thing that sounded like it comes after Windows, but it actually just doesn't play games. And you're like, so why did I upgrade to this?
I think I heard about Windows 2000 for like a week, and then I never heard of it after that.
Exactly, because it was just a massive marketing blunder. But what's positive about what happened with Surface Pro 3 is they said, even if we make a Surface Pro 4, we're going to make the accessories backwards compatible. We promise. And they promised, and it was. When the new keyboards came out, the new all the accessories came out, they were compatible. And then what's really great to see with Oculus is that it's expandable. You can have up to 3 cameras on Oculus if you want. I think with Vive you could have like 1 million sensors if you wanted. You could have more than like 20, and you could have like warehouse scale VR.
And then you could have multiplayer players too. You could have like a bunch of people in the same.
You got trackers. You could have wireless. You could have some people just only playing on their phone. I saw a demo of that. What's really good is that they're very clearly making sure that products that are released today are not going to be obsolete tomorrow. I think that's really important with VR. If it is to survive.
And I was super happy how Vive has been releasing upgrades to their old headset rather than just making a completely new headset. Because like they could have very easily just said that if you want to get the better headband, and if you want to have the better controllers, and if you want to have like the wireless, you have to get the Vive Pro. They could have easily done that, right? But they didn't. They released Vive Pro for the resolution, because obviously to change resolution, you actually have to have another headset, right? But for everything else, you could just buy the upgrades for your old Vive. And I was like, oh, that's so awesome.
That is really good. I think maybe we don't know exactly what their plan is, but we can see from the evidence. Like they've got a good strategy, or a strategy that works for us with the upgrades. So it probably means that they have a good strategy that's going to work to make, VR survive. It's clearly not something they're just going to give up on from what I've seen.
So it seems like in general, to sum up what the majority of our discussion went in terms of what needs to survive, it seems like they need the opposite of exclusivity. They just need to make things as non-exclusive as possible, as opt-in as possible, and kind of spread it out. So it's not just like VR has to be the new gaming system. Like it's not that VR has to replace like PlayStation and all the old gaming systems and has to replace the PC gaming. It's more that VR just has to find a place within that gaming kind of architecture. So you could have opt-in VR games. You could have VR amusement parks or amusement areas that you can go to out, like arcades and whatnot. You could have actual like VR experiences at like Universal Studios, like actual like jet coaster, like roller coaster type of things, and kind of just expand it as much as possible. Maybe even not even just gaming. Maybe it could be like we were saying, spectation. You could have VR spectation of sports. Right, and even VR virtual reality movies or like short things like that. I think expansion and non-exclusivity, I guess.
I think something that happened with the media is there was this obsession with what is VR, but they weren't thinking of it as a platform. And instead of thinking of it, smartphones are these small screens that have apps. If they would think of it more as apps could be universal. You could buy one app and it could run on your iPad, or it could run on your phone, or it could run on a console or on a TV, and that's what VR could also be, right? If it were, I don't think the word is multimodal, but it's like it doesn't have to just be a first-person experience, which is the way that Sony continues to sell it to this day. That you're going to go in and you're going to be running around Resident Evil. And
honestly, I think that's probably one of the worst ways to do it, because movement is a big issue in VR. So to make it your main experience have to be a first-person shooter where you're running around and shooting, that's like the hardest thing to do in VR.
Yeah. People are going to watch that ad and go, I don't want to do that. But if they showed an ad where you can put on a headset and watch Hatsune Miku do a live concert in front of you, and you could choose any position in the audience to stand. You could stand right up front, or you could stand up in the bleachers, not the bleachers, the stalls up in the top. I think the problem, it's not really a problem. I think if there's anything that people could do right now, it would be to talk about it differently in media. And it would start with advertising. If they did the advertising differently, the media would talk about it differently, and then people would see it as something like, okay, I'll buy my £200 device, I'll experience as much VR as I can, and not think that I have to be in an FPS game.
Right. Well, sounds good to me. So I think we've covered the issue as much as we can this drive. So I think we're going to end it there. Been great talking to you. We should do this again. Till next time. Yep. Do you have any closing remarks?
No closing remarks. It's been a pleasure doing this live stream with you. I hope that this becomes a series. And to anyone in the comments, definitely leave suggestions. For what you would prefer, like a future episode to be about.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you guys I don't know who Nihongo Gamer is, or you haven't seen his channel, I put a link in the description. Definitely check it out.
Yeah.
He has
excellent.
Lots and lots of really good content. Covers everything from like technology, video games, Japan, whatever all the type of stuff that I'm interested in. Probably most of my viewers would be interested in. Like he does as well. So definitely check him out. So that's all for this time. Till next time. Yoroshiku.
Peace.